In the year 1600, a group of English merchants, calling themselves the East India Company, arrived on the shores of India. They came seeking spices and other treasures, eager to trade with the wealthy Mughal Empire. Little did they know their arrival would mark the beginning of a new chapter in India's history, one that would see the rise and fall of an empire and the birth of a nation. These early traders, with their ships laden with goods, were initially welcomed by the Mughal rulers. They set up trading posts in key coastal cities like Surat, Madras and Calcutta. The company's focus was purely commercial, but as the years passed, their ambitions began to grow. The Mughal Empire, once a symbol of power and prosperity, began to weaken in the 18th century. This presented an opportunity for the East India Company, who saw a chance to expand their influence beyond trade. With a combination of shrewd diplomacy and military might, they began to assert their dominance over the fragmented Indian kingdoms. The stage was set for a dramatic shift in power, with the East India Company poised to become the masters of India. The East India Company, initially content with its trading activities, slowly began to flex its muscles. They started interfering in local politics, exploiting rivalries between Indian rulers to their advantage. The company's army, composed of Indian sepoys led by British officers, became a formidable force. The Battle of Plassey in 1757 marked a turning point. Robert Clive, a young clerk turned military strategist, led the company's forces to a decisive victory against the Nawab of Bengal. This victory gave the company control over Bengal, a wealthy province, and fueled their territorial ambitions. Further victories followed, and the company's grip on India tightened. They annexed vast territories through treaties and conquest, often using dubious means to subdue local rulers. By the early 19th century, the East India Company had transformed from a trading enterprise into a de facto ruling power, controlling vast swathes of India. The East India Company's rise to power was marked by a series of significant battles and treaties. The Battle of Buxar in 1764, for instance, saw the company defeat the combined forces of the Mughal Emperor and the Nawab of Awadh. This victory cemented British control over Bengal and Bihar, further weakening the Mughal Empire. Treaties, often imposed on Indian rulers under duress, played an equally crucial role in expanding British dominion. The doctrine of lapse, introduced by Lord Dalhousie, became a notorious tool for annexation. This policy allowed the company to annex any princely state where the ruler died without a male heir. Through these methods, the East India Company gradually subjugated most of the Indian subcontinent. By the mid-19th century, they had established a vast empire ruling over millions of Indians. Their rule, however, was marked by exploitation and a disregard for Indian customs and traditions, sowing the seeds of discontent that would eventually lead to rebellion. The establishment of British rule, known as the British Raj, brought about significant changes in India's social and economic fabric. The British introduced Western education and legal systems, aiming to create a class of Indians who would be Indian in blood and colour, but English in taste, in opinions, in morals, and in intellect. This led to the emergence of a new Western-educated Indian elite who would later play a pivotal role in the nationalist movement. Economically, India became a source of raw materials for British industries and a captive market for British manufactured goods. Traditional Indian industries declined, unable to compete with British imports. This led to widespread poverty and unemployment, particularly among artisans and weavers. The British also introduced railways, telegraph lines, and postal services, primarily to facilitate the movement of troops and resources. While these innovations did modernize India to some extent, they were primarily designed to serve British interests. The social and economic policies of the British Raj had a profound impact on Indian society, creating a complex legacy of both progress and exploitation. Section 5, The Uprising of 1857, A Nation Awakens. The year 1857 witnessed a massive uprising against British rule that shook the foundations of the East India Company's empire. The immediate trigger was the introduction of new Enfield rifles, rumoured to be greased with animal fat, which offended both Hindu and Muslim sepoys. The revolt, which began in Meerut, quickly spread across northern and central India. Sepoys, joined by peasants, artisans and dispossessed rulers, rose up against the British. The rebellion, though ultimately crushed, was a watershed moment in Indian history. The 1857 uprising, often referred to as the Sepoy Mutiny or the First War of Independence, exposed the vulnerabilities of British rule and ignited a spirit of resistance among Indians. It marked a turning point, paving the way for the rise of Indian nationalism and the eventual struggle for independence. Section 6. Seeds of Nationalism, a New Dream Takes Root. The suppression of the 1857 uprising led to significant changes in the administration of India. The British Crown took direct control, ending the East India Company's rule. While the British implemented some reforms, they also tightened their grip on India, determined to prevent another rebellion. However, the seeds of nationalism had been sown. Indians, inspired by the sacrifices of those who fought in 1857, began to demand greater autonomy and an end to British rule. The Indian National Congress, formed in 1885, provided a platform for educated Indians to voice their grievances and advocate for political reforms. The early nationalists, often referred to as moderates, believed in achieving independence through gradual and constitutional means. They advocated for greater Indian representation in government and civil services. However, as the 20th century dawned, a new generation of nationalist leaders emerged, demanding complete independence and challenging British rule more assertively. Section 7. Gandhi's Leadership, a Beacon of Hope. The emergence of Mahatma Gandhi on the Indian political scene in the early 20th century transformed the struggle for independence. Gandhi, with his philosophy of satyagraha, or non-violent resistance, galvanized the Indian masses and inspired them to fight for their rights. Gandhi's leadership was instrumental in uniting Indians across religious and regional divides. He launched mass movements like the non-cooperation movement and the civil disobedience movement, challenging British rule on multiple fronts. His message of non-violence resonated not just in India, but across the world. Gandhi's unwavering belief in non-violence, coupled with his astute political acumen, put immense pressure on the British government. He became a symbol of India's struggle for freedom, inspiring millions to join the fight for independence. Section 8. The March to Freedom, India's Struggle for Independence. The decades leading up to India's independence were marked by intense political activism and growing demands for freedom. The Second World War, which weakened the British Empire, further fueled the momentum for independence. Following the war, the British government, realizing the inevitability of Indian independence, initiated the process of transferring power. However, the issue of partition, with the Muslim League demanding a separate Muslim state, complicated matters. Despite Gandhi's efforts to maintain a united India, the partition plan was eventually accepted. The Indian Independence Act of 1947 paved the way for the creation of two independent nations, India and Pakistan. Section 9. Independence and Partition, a Bittersweet Dawn. On August 15, 1947, India finally achieved its long-cherished dream of independence, ending centuries of British rule. Jawaharlal Nehru, India's first Prime Minister, addressed the nation, declaring, "At the stroke of the midnight hour, when the world sleeps, India will awake to life and freedom." However, the joy of independence was overshadowed by the pain of partition. The division of Punjab and Bengal along religious lines triggered one of the largest mass migrations in human history, accompanied by horrific violence and bloodshed. The partition left an indelible mark on the psyche of both India and Pakistan. Millions were displaced and countless lives were lost. As India celebrated its hard-won freedom, it also grappled with the challenges of a newly independent nation, striving to heal the wounds of partition and build a brighter future for its people.